background, PE teacher in Southampton in a large secondary school. We run GCSE PE. We use the AQA spec. So some of my examples tonight will talk about the AQA spec, but that the core underlying principles actually can be transferred from any lesson. We do a lot of work cross-curricular in school using the same principles, so hopefully it should be able to transfer into what you're doing. Please use the chat box in the bottom right hand corner to pose any questions. I'll check that as we go through quite regularly, and if there's anything I need to obviously go away and have a look at or find some additional resources for you to answer your questions, I will do that during the 5-minute break halfway through the session. Fantastic. So just a quick question in the bottom right hand corner. Are you all at the moment GCSE PE teachers? And if you are, can you just please indicate which exam board you're with? So then obviously I can try and bring in some examples as we go through. Oh, fantastic. So 2 AQA, 1 Excel. So Laura, I'll try and obviously, hopefully, make some of the stuff I talk about quite transferable to Edexcel as well. Brilliant. So last question before we start. How many people have actually come across things such as solar taxonomy, Bloom's taxonomy, that sort of stuff? Brilliant. So what I'm going to do is go through and just kind of talk about one particular way of planning lessons that you can look into it, and hopefully try and get the best outcomes for the students that you work with. So here we go. If my laptop is working. Brilliant. So what I'm going to do today is spend the majority of the time talking about something called solar taxonomy. I'm going to give you a bit of a background rundown, and then I'm going to show you some classroom practical examples of how to use it in a way that you can plan lessons, develop questions, think about the different activities and learning that you're going to be asking students to undertake in your lessons, think about differentiation, bit of feedback, that sort of stuff as well. Hopefully it will link through quite well. These are the course aims. I won't run through all of them. But like I said, in basics, all I'm going to go through today is just trying to get you to understand the process, the principles, and kind of make you think, you know, if you've already come across things like solar taxonomy before, trying to look at it in a different way with some actual classroom examples from another teacher to try and show you what we're doing, how we're working it, and why it's working so well. So whatever lesson that we're trying to design, whether it is using solar taxonomy or not, or just based on whatever it is, with principles that our schools asking us to work to, the idea is that we're trying to get students obviously to go from shallow to deep learning. Now this can take the series of a single lesson, a series of lessons, or even a unit before a student actually develops that deep understanding of a particular topic. And the idea that we're trying to do, obviously with such an exam-based culture at the moment, is trying to get students to have mastery of that content that we're trying to teach them. Now, as we go through, obviously, we're trying to get students to do what we call mastery tasks and developmental tasks. So at the beginning of our lessons, we're really trying to get them to understand the core principles so they get the basic background information, and then later on in the lesson, or maybe the second lesson, that's when we move on to the developmental tasks, where we're trying to get students to obviously think about the information we've given them in a lot more deeper thought, and actually trying to get them to manipulate what we've asked them to do, that sort of thing, so they develop that real understanding of the topic we're teaching. So I'm going to show you obviously how we can do it. Now, just a bit of background information before we go, so you understand why I'm talking so much about solo tonight. We've worked through a number of different models, Bloom's accelerated learning cycle, but now we've found solo taxonomy, and for the last 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, we've been working through solo in the way that we deliver our lessons. You know, things like Bloom's work really, really well. You know, they're good for thinking about questioning, but for planning lessons, for planning challenge, it's quite hard for a student when they look at that ladder there to think, right, I'm at the remembering stage, need to move to the understanding. From the understanding to applying to analysing, it's hard for them to see what the next task would be independently of us actually asking them to do something, which is why we've then obviously moved on to using solar taxonomy instead. The whole process of it is actually getting students to understand the learning that is taking place and actually being able to see how their learning is progressing. That's the beauty of solar taxonomy. It's the structure of observed learning outcomes. So they actually see what it is they're doing, where they're going, and they can quite clearly, quite easily see what they as individuals need to do next to move on. Just a bit of rationale. The planning structure is really good, and we're going to talk about planning quite a lot in the next section to see how we can actually think about undertaking our lesson plans. And I'm going to actually do a couple of tasks where I'm going to ask you guys to help me plan lessons online, visibly in front of us here, and we can actually use the chat box to think about the content we're going to deliver. If you get students involved in it, it's really, really good, because students, if they understand what they're doing and they understand the taxonomy, then obviously they can then go away and actually, in a lesson, be able to access it. It doesn't mean that you have to teach all of the jargon. For the first year when we were using solo taxonomy, we really stuck with all the words of the different levels. Students got a bit confused, that the words weren't really as necessary as it was to pretty much just understand that they need to move between the levels. They didn't really need to know the names of them. So the jargon is helpful when you're introducing it, but you obviously don't need to stick to it as you go through. It's a great way for showing progress, which I'll show you in a moment, and there's lots of opportunities for feedback, AFL, so students can actually see that they're going from one level to the next. Hopefully as we go through, I'm going to show you that there's different ways that you can use it to obviously measure progress. Now, I am not an advocate for having progress visible for people, observers coming into a lesson. It shouldn't be for them, but for students, solo is a really good way for them to actually, as they're going through, for them to actually see the progress they're making. So it's not for observers, it's actually for the individuals in the class. I'm going to show you some examples of how students can actually see they're making progress, which is for them and only for them. And the benefit of yourself as well, not for the observers coming in and seeing things. I'm going to show you some ways we can actually create success criteria and actually differentiate things, and talk about different rubrics you can do as well. And I'll show you some examples of what that means as we go through. So in the bottom right hand chat box, I'm now going to go through the structure of solo. If there's any questions that you have, if there's anything you don't understand, then please, as I said, as we go through, to make it as interactive as possible, please type things into the chat box. So the different phases of solo taxonomy are as this. Now, the very, very bottom level of the solo taxonomy is the pre-structural. Now, what this is really is a way for students to see that, or to indicate that at that level they don't know anything about the topic. If I ask them in my lesson, what do you know about gases exchange and anaerobic respiration, aerobic respiration, all those sorts of things, if a student turns around to me and says they don't know, then in my head, or if I'm using a rubrics in the lesson, they can actually indicate that they're at the pre-structural level. They don't really know anything about it. It's quite new to them. The next level up is the unistructural. Unistructural is where they actually know the one idea, the one big principle about the topic. Okay, so it may be in an anaerobic lesson, the fact they are going to be looking at anaerobic respiration may be the one key principle. So the one thing that they learn in the lesson is there's something called anaerobic respiration. Very simple information indeed. The next stage. Now, a lot of people misuse this stage and they skip this as quickly as possible because they want to get to the higher levels of the taxonomy. But actually, I believe, and I think it's not just me, there's a lot of people out there, I think that the multi-structural stage is actually one of the most important stages in solo, and you shouldn't actually try and zip past this. Now, when you're teaching a particular topic, whether it's physique, somatotypes and so on, this is where you actually break down the topic and you teach the students the individual core facts, and the students then know the several things about that particular topic. So physique, they might understand the Sheldon score, they might understand what a mesomorph is, an ectomorph is, an endomorph is. So the real basic core information that they really need to understand if they're actually going to A, pass their exam, and B, obviously be able to build upon that foundation to ask more difficult questions, whether it's within an exam or just within the course. So the multi-structural stage is where you actually go away and you teach them the key fundamental facts and information, definitions about that particular topic. When students have got a real grasp of that, then we move on to what we call the developmental side of it. This is a bit where now they've got the information, the background knowledge, they can actually use that content knowledge in a more in-depth way. So the relational phase is where they actually then start seeing how things link together. So for instance, when we're looking at physique and somatotypes, you may have taught them about obviously ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph. You can now bring it together by elaborating even more on what the Sheldon score is and the fact that each individual isn't just one or the other, they're actually part of all of it. And it also then start thinking about actually what different sports are suited to different activities and so on. So that is the stage where we're bringing it all together and we're contextualising what it is that the students have learned. but it really is based on students have a really good